Well, she really didn't know as much about her family as she could have known, but somewhere there had been a rift in her family where her grandmother and her grandmother's sisters were not quite on correct speaking terms, the details of which she really doesn't know as much as she should. However, it turned out, once she told me, and essentially here's the story. Her great-grandmother was the sister of your great-grandmother, Bessie, and my dad. They were all siblings. So her grandmother was a first cousin.
Okay.
I remember her great-grandmother very well. I remember her grandmother. And sometime, it was during the Korean War period, I would guess, a fellow came to Dallas, and he stopped by my parents' house, and I visited with him some, and he was a nice man, older than myself, and he was an engineer with a company that was going to make an instant coffee vending machine, which sounds like a very ordinary thing now, but there wasn't anything like it then. Well, I kind of thought that was a good idea, and I thought, well, maybe I can rent one from him or buy one of them and put it in the student union at SMU, maybe it's medical school, and make some money out of it. But he told me that my idea was good and bad both. It was a good idea as if the machines worked, but they're very finicky still. This was early in the game. He said I'd never be able to keep them running. So I abandoned that idea. I remembered a little bit about him and went about my life's business, never to think about him again. Well, when she told me she was, I said, I remember a man coming to Dallas. He went over and visited my parents, and he was an engineer. I told him, I recapitulated about the same stories I've told you. I said, I think he went over to my Aunt Bessie's home, but that's all I ever knew about him. And she said, well, I think that was my father. So the noose gets tighter. Well, due to her interest, and this man felt that somehow, we had been very nice to him in Dallas, but my recollections were quite limited. And since she was interested in the Holocaust and things like that, that I told her, I'm working on these projects. I'll be glad to go further into the genealogy and material that I've been looking at, and frankly overwhelmed by it. Well, she got even more enthusiastic about it. Well, she and her father both came down to Dallas. Father was an old man, brought his girlfriend even, and came for the Holocaust lecture, which I sponsor, at a party, and it was a very nice visit. She's terribly bright woman. She's the lawyer who's head of the medical oncology ethics department of Novartis. Novartis is a massive drug company, one of the biggest in the world. So she really is an accomplished person. and so we started going over some pictures. Meanwhile, another friend who'd sort of been involved with this project with me, he got involved also meeting her. Well, this process, which started out as a seed, now is a forest. But I had tremendous number of photographs from Europe and early pictures of the United States, and these really kind of interesting. They're kind of interesting anyway. I don't know if anybody has much of this stuff anywhere in the family. There was a little bit that your great-grandmother had, and there was a little bit, really an important document, that Merritt and Rosalind Fruman had. And that's where they were trying to get a young girl into the United States, get her out of Poland. Probably was 1938, 39, somewhere in those years. Well, the effort failed, but I don't know why it failed. But I had the document, and then Rosalind wanted it back. Now, and I gave it back to her. Only it disappeared.
So the document, which
we were trying to get a girl out of Europe, and that would have been another cousin. So that's sad. But I have pictures of that cousin. I have all this material.
I remember seeing you have a binder of material that you've collected.
That's right.
I remember that.
Yes, but that's only part of it. There's several binders, and the next process was to have my buddy, who's a retired doctor, scan them, and then they got entered into the computer.
Oh, great.
Now, also I made copies. Well, he really arranged the copies. Just had them reproduced at, I guess it's Sam's or something.
Uh-huh.
And then my job was to, and I'm almost finished with most of it, to put a little caption or what I knew, maybe a little sentence or two, on the back of a copy.
Mm-hmm.
And many of these copies are duplicates of each other because that's how they were reproduced, and I didn't realize until midway that, hey, I've seen this picture just the other day.
Mm-hmm.
So at any rate, there's a caption. Now, those captioned photographs or duplicates are in the hands now, almost all in the hands of Lisa Goldman.
Mm-hmm.
Her next task is to get this stuff in a more orderly fashion and then put the captions instead of on the back of things to put them on the front.
Okay.
So, in a few sentences which sound terribly mundane, it proves to be a little bit more demanding. Now, you might say, hey, Bert, why is it so demanding? And I finally figured out why it was so demanding. It's because all of these people, not all of them, but a great number of them died unnaturally, victims of the Holocaust.
Right.
And it becomes an unpleasant thing to see these faces over and over again at a party or a picnic, knowing that almost all of them perished. So it's like being in an odd mausoleum. And if you do it long enough, pardon?
No, I can absolutely imagine.
Yeah, well, and that's how it impacted me. So toward the end, I began to slow down dramatically. Mm-hmm. It's almost like, I'd been close to the fire too long. Yeah. And so it's not fully complete. But this woman on her own, because she has tremendous computer skills, has, dug up and organized a lot of things, including one relative that we thought miraculously escaped the Holocaust because the names are right and the ages are right and the grandfather's name is right and he's from the right place at the right time. Well, he proves not to be a man who I had thought was, let's use my father's name. It's just easier. It was not Adolf's relative, his sister's family, but it proves to be his brother-in-law's family, because his brother-in-law had the same last name, obviously. Regina Einspruch married a man named Jakob Schindlauer, and this was a Schindlauer. So everything matched. Well, what happened with Schindlauer? Why did I think he survived? Well, due to her diligence, she begins to pursue the variations of spelling, because a lot of these names have a phonetic quality to them.
Right.
And so she pursued very eagerly and found that these Schindlauers, whom I later, didn't take me too long, figured that these are in-laws, made it to Paris somehow. I'm from Paris to Rio de Janeiro. And
really?
the next generation, and these people are alive, are in Santiago, Chile. So, I mean, the story has, a very winding quality to it. But, she's very, very diligent.
Wow.
And of course, there are a lot of blind alleys that she runs up. And very often my role is to say, these people are in no way related to us, this person or that one.
Right. Because
there are so many stories we would have heard, I would have heard, and I would have remembered. My brother does not know these stories. Now, the reason for that is that common to things in my era, people lived at home. When I went to medical school, I lived at home. Or people lived with a relative. All the expanses of apartment buildings didn't exist.
Yeah.
So as a result, I had a very long exposure to the Frumans and my parents and all these people. My brother went off to Rice and got married very young. So
your brother went to Rice. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Just like Stuart.
Yeah.
And Harry Letterman.
His name was Harry Letterman?
No. You never heard the name of Harry Letterman?
No.
He's a cousin of yours.
Is he?
Yep.
No, I did not know that.
Well, see, this is how we all become mongrels. Well, when I get all this stuff together, I'll explain to you. But briefly, and Harry Letterman is alive.
Mm-hmm.
Harry and Mimi Letterman, whom I barely know, because he never lived in Dallas. They lived in Fort Worth, so your dad knew them much better, of course. Mm-hmm. And his mother was Marion Letterman, Marion Fruman Letterman. Mm-hmm. But his name doesn't mean anything to you.
No, it doesn't. I mean, that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to talk to you, is because I feel like so much has been not passed down, and I mean, part of
it'd be interesting. Whom do we point the finger at? Why wasn't it passed down?
Oh, I don't.
Was there some ill will in one way or another? Like, I have seen the late Stacy Fruman at Stewart's Breakfast, but she's nobody I would want to have anything to do with, and she's dead now anyway.
Right. Yeah.
So that'd be a thing. Well, you say, look, hey, nobody wanted to have much to do with Stacy. She's too crazy.
I mean, maybe it's painful to look back. It's also potentially like people focus on those closer to them, and they don't necessarily feel any sort of connection to people that are more like relatives that are more peripheral. And so that information doesn't get like Harry Letterman. I would have never probably met him or heard stories about him.
Well, I think it's a cultural error. You know, if you don't know where you've been, you probably won't know exactly where you're going.
Sure.
And I think it's a real error.
Yeah, I agree.
You see how quickly I got back with you.
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Everybody would know that about me.
Yes. Well, I mean, I always remember you being very welcoming, receptive, and curious about our family, and so I felt, I mean, one of my main interests as an artist is to make connections between things that aren't necessarily connected, but someone's genealogy is sort of this inherent connection that unless you understand it or are curious about it or research it, it can get lost. And so...
Well, look at it even from a point of view that has an element of morbidity to it.
Sure.
This woman who contacted me, although she's perfectly healthy in a physical sense, had her gallbladder taken out. Now, why would somebody do that? Well, her mother died of cancer of the gallbladder. Her grandmother died of cancer of the bile ducts going into the gallbladder.
Right.
I mean, that's valuable knowledge to know that.
Absolutely.
Or, I had two cousins that wound up with diabetes,
right,
which came from their father's side, and both of them, they've died now, and one of them lost a leg, and one of them have lost two legs. And these were healthy, strapping guys, but they got the disease, and I think it's very good to know these things.
I think so too.
For all the obvious reasons, but
it's practical, but it's also really interesting. And like you said, if you don't know where you come from, it's hard to know where you're going. So, I don't know. I think it's a really interesting thing to learn more about, and I'm
remember, genetics do not go away; they go to sleep. Like your great grandmother, she died. She had a cancer in her colon, and also she had an Alzheimer variant, and I put her into the old age home, and she had good care. The next person that I'll show you a picture of, but I have it, but in this process of organization to suit other people, I've disorganized Einspruch here. But Merritt Fruman, he also had Alzheimer's disease. And I have a picture of my father, who's much older than Merritt, and Merritt has the gaze of a demented person, but my father doesn't have it. So it's kind of good to know what other Michigas travels within a tight genetic ring.
Right.
But I'm pleased that you're interested in, and Stuart told me that you had some interest, but, he's very polite in dealing with me, so I thought, well, it's fine. That's fine. He's a nice guy, and he's placating me. I know.
No, I mean, I've been thinking about it for a while. I'm at a point where, I don't know, I think it's time for me to find out. And being that I'm kind of putting myself in the career path of being a researcher, I think it would be valuable in more than one way to know about this stuff.
Well, when is it the 5th or 6th copy of your magazine's coming out? I can't remember.
6th.
All right. By the way, I didn't see the others. Now, Stuart told me, but
yeah.
Wherever I went, I couldn't find one.
Oh, well,
and he was supposed to
I'll bring some.
He was supposed to get me one, but he never did.
Oh, well, we'll figure that out.
Yep, that you can do.
Yeah.
And when you're in town doing the launch, you'll call me.
Yes.
And we'll link up. We'll probably link up over here, so you can see more in a more tangible way what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, that sounds great.
And I did introduce. Well, Stuart already knew another cousin. I didn't know him because he was so much younger than myself, and his name is Brian Rose.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you know Brian. I don't know. Who knows what?
I know Robert.
Okay, well,
I never met Robert, but I know of Robert.
You don't need to meet him. But
yeah,
that's
I know.
All right. He's one of these genes, like a chimpanzee jumped off the tree too quickly.
Yeah, every family's got a stinker or two.
Right now, he was too flamboyant to make it secret.
Yeah.
But this fellow Brian is a nephew of Robert Rose. He's the son of Larry Rose.
Mm-hmm.
You know who that is, though?
Yes.
So you know. Okay, Larry had a son. And he is an exceptionally bright guy. So Stuart and I and Brian, I had never met him. But Pearl said, please look him up.
Yeah.
And he had changed firms. And I made, I would say, a half-hearted attempt, but it was a bona fide attempt and didn't reach him.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally I talked to Stuart about this and said, please invite him to the breakfast because I had a chance, then I see your grandmother, your late grandmother,
yes,
and some other faces. I'm not pleased to see all the faces. Most of them aren't relatives anyway. They're just a narrow bunch of us who are related. And he didn't come, but Stuart says he's been there. So I said, look, we will get around this, and you and I and Brian will have lunch. And also I had invited them over, which they came for a little breakfast I had for him. And he makes a very good impression. And so does his wife.
Mm-hmm.
She makes a very fine impression.
Hmm.
And they're an interesting little cadre of relatives, but they're your relatives just as much as they're mine.
Yeah.
So when I try to tell people, try to encourage anybody, and saying the lines, they're your relatives too, it doesn't resonate much with them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some people get stuck in their own kind of stories and forget that, it comes from somewhere, or they don't particularly find that interesting.
Well, it doesn't have to be interesting because it's not like any of us, including you, own this story.
Right.
But when I'm gone, and it's not done right, the stories end.
Yeah.
There's no one who'll know anything.
Right.
There's other generations. This story belongs to other generations of people who are going to come through. So right. I'm really sharing the bottleneck, and I'm the cork in that bottle, and I don't feel that's the right thing to do. Otherwise, what we're doing is we're killing these same people who've died. We're killing them again.
Well, I hope that I can assist in perpetuating the stories.
They put yourself in a pathway of some honest work. All right, so when you're in town, just call me.
Okay.
Now, let me give you my cell number.
Okay, and actually, yes, I will take your cell number. And also, so because I'm only going to be in town the one day, I'm installing. I'm going to try to get away, but I will be back. I'm actually giving a talk at a class at SMU on March 15th, which is a Tuesday. And so I can come in a day earlier and make a point to come over to your house for that day, and we can just spend the day looking through things.
Any of the ways that work, if I'm here,
okay,
we'll be able to do it. Okay, the cell...
Hold on, let me make sure, because I think my dad sent me your entire contact information, so I'm going to check to see if I might already have everything. So
okay,
I have 214-597-5411.
That's the cell.
Okay.
That's the most reliable of the ways.
And I have your address, and I have your birthday, and I have your spouse, and I have your home, your office, your mobile. I think I have everything.
Now, you know, we do live like 4 houses away on Lindenwood from your cousins who entered your family in a distaff way, and that's Joan David, our son.
Yeah.
So, you know, so I can hiccup both and get there.
That's great. Okay, perfect. Well, then I know exactly where you live.
Good. So we have our own little shtetl.
Do you still have the peacocks?
The peacocks?
Uh-huh.
Well, they were all killed at the farm.
Oh.
I was not successful at dealing with them because the wildlife at the farm, there was just wildlife.
Yes.
And there were plenty of coyotes and things. It's not like my idea, which came from a schoolyard, where they could just hop onto a low roof of a shed, and there were kids around that the peacocks, you know, were tame, but you didn't have coyotes there. You didn't have anything there.
Right.
So each one of them eventually succumbed to nature.
Yeah. Well.
All right, so I'll hear from you, Sally. I have your stuff.
Yes.
I guess.
You have my stuff,
right.
And I will hopefully see you very soon. Thanks for calling.
Excellent. Thank you. Look forward to seeing you.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.